Alright, so this is the final unit video, questions of sexual identity. And this video I'm going to talk about that, but then I'm also going to give some general thoughts about the class, about topics discussed, and just the presentations that we've been doing lately, not lately, but today on the papers that are going to be done. When it comes to the question of sexual identity, though, I will be talking about Hairdresser for Harar, being the text primarily discussed, but then also Leaving Civvy Street. Both of these have characters in them uh, that are homosexual, I guess would be the proper terminology to be using for both of these cases, exploring what that means in the circumstances they are in the wake of the colonial influence, not so much directly under colonial rule, although Civvy Street, I guess, still would have been, but it was within the colonial powers themselves. So in that way, we kind of see how homosexuality really is a taboo in a lot of cultures, not just American. But then we see this also happening in Africa, in both Zimbabwe, and we see that it's not necessarily something that is addressed directly by colonial text or post-colonial text, but is obviously deeply influenced and affected by the influence of the colonial powers. As discussed in class, we talk about how pre-colonial some homosexual relations were kind of understood and accepted, but following especially the introduction of Christianity, obviously certain rhetorics are implemented that this is no longer acceptable and punishable by death. And we see in videos like we see in the film man, I'm blanking on right now. Ragtag. A use of a very Christian rhetoric as a shield. This sort of rhetoric often is used as a shield, not genuine, a not genuine argument to be made, but rather an argument being made for the sake of having an argument. It's having a slogan, as it were, as we're seeing this used again and again throughout societies where when people need to oppress someone, they look for a slogan that says, okay, well, we don't like these people, what slogan can we use to justify our oppression of them, most notably in the Trump campaign. But this is also brought up in my reading for my final paper, which my final paper being about Fury's pedagogy of the oppressed, and he talks about slogans and about easily accessible phrases that are banked or deposited into the minds of the oppressed, and we can see that idea being executed with this sort of anti LGBT sentiment in these colonial situations or post colonial situations, and then with that being said, we talked in class, one of the last things we talked about in class is that these kind of divisions of the questions of sexual identity, national identity, cultural identity, personal identity, all these are kind of arbitrary in the fact that they all influence and have an effect on one another. My classmate Chris and I actually had a talk where he's looking at I think the work is The Day They Burned the Books, where he's talking about how he's looking at how that short story, although it does take place in a post-colonial setting, also is very much influenced by feminist theory and feminist issues, and the intersectionality of those two. And what I'm really seeing in my reading as well is that it doesn't seem that the issues being addressed in Pedagogy of the Oppressed are could be limited to any one of these questions of national, of personal, of sexual identity. None of those questions seem like they are restricted by Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I could take the ideas and the concepts being proposed in that, and in many post-colonial texts, and apply them to issues that are being brought up in all of these, and that it's never quite one of these problems that's ever the issue, but combinations of all of them, and that to truly kind of get over or to examine these issues, it may be prudent to look at one at a time, but in the end, I guess they all would have to be examined as a whole, and how the colonial influence has influenced every aspect of the post-colonial world. Post-colonial being used very loosely here, as we've discussed in class as well. That is it really post-colonial, temporarily at least, maybe post, overt colonial. So, with that being said, this has been a really, really fascinating class. Really opened up my mind even further than it had been. I thought I had been pretty knowledgeable about, situations and about the issues prior to coming into this class, but leaving it, I feel like I have a much, much more deep knowledge and deep understanding of some of the issues, and recognizing also that I barely know any of the issues, and that there's quite a bit more to explore, a lot more literature to read up into, read into and look into the histories of a lot of the colonial issues that have affected our world and how they continue to affect our world. And for me personally, I find that like my biggest takeaway from this class is how I, as an individual, can kind of fight the colonial and oppressive powers through my own, interactions with my students moving forward as a teacher, and how I can, maybe look beyond traditional canon and maybe look into the idea of diversifying that, but then also really taking the remnants of the colonial influence in our education system, where the teacher assumes the power position and claims to be the possessor of knowledge and understanding, and knows what's best for the students, and knows that what I've been taught and what the system has taught me is what you must learn, because if you need to succeed, you need to fit into this box. And it's like, well, really, no. Every individual has the right to determine their own education and what they need to learn to fully realize their humanity, and anything besides that is oppressive. So I think that I can really take that idea and explore it and expound it and see how I can use that to influence my teaching from now until the time I stop teaching, which who knows when that will be. So that's really my takeaway from this class. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for really just all the learning, all the discussions, and I really look forward to continuing discussions and continuing to learn. So, thank you.